storytelling festival with Taffy, Zahra and Despina. So we cover the world. But as we're in East Anglia, we're having a bit of a mow. And so people might have come here for stories, but they ain't going to get, well, they'll get a bit of a story, but it's not what they're expecting. So I'm going to sort of start with Taffy, because, shut up, that wasn't a prompt.
Yeah.
Let me finish the sentence.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the king of half sentences. Right, so...
I'll do the other half.
You can do the other half, right. So, Taffy and I go back a minute or two in Suffolk to his days with, was it Magic Lantern?
It was Magic Lantern.
Can you tell us about Magic Lantern?
Magic Lantern were a shadow puppet group who illustrated folk songs and stories with shadow puppets and much more. But because shadow puppets only work well in half light or in the darkness, at festivals, when they wanted me to work in broad sunshine, we had to do something else. So we turned to circus skills, which is the other half of popular culture. And I became a fire eater, lay on a bed of nails, and danced on broken glass. And then that would be village fetes. But then in Suffolk, where I was living at the time, there was a series of fairs, massive fairs called the Albion Fairs. There was tree fair, there was horse fair, places where there used to be horse fairs. And when I went to these with Magic Lantern, I encountered two storytellers. One was a man called Billy Bullshit, and he headed around the festival site, and it was a shilling a lie, a half crown, a whopper. And I can reveal here that Billy Bullshit was actually a man who we now know as Hugh Lupton. So that was his roots. There were also, who can remember at fairs you used to get the inflatable wrestlers?
Yeah.
In a booth. Well, the man who did the patter for the inflatable wrestlers was a man called Daniel Morden, who we now know as a storyteller. There was also an oldish fella with a long white beard, always a top hat, a flashy waistcoat, and a crooked stick, who anybody could stop anywhere, and he would have a yarn for them. And that man was John Rowe. And whenever I could, I stood next to John Rowe to enjoy his stories. And it must be said, it was usually somewhere near the bar.
Guilty as charged.
Near the beer tent, wasn't it?
So,
And we became chums, I'm delighted to say.
yeah, and we was also bumped into the bits you might not remember. I think Magic Lantern came down to the Drama Centre in Ipswich, and there was Trevor Nunn, I think, was because he was an Ipswich boy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he was there.
It was when Peter Hall was at Bury St Edmunds, if we're going to name drop.
Yeah, well, I didn't know these geezers were. It was just an evening at the Drama Centre.
We just did what we did.
Yeah, and that was in, which is now the John Mills Theatre. There was storytelling going on.
Yeah, and the pub, one of the pubs where you could always have a tune, a tale or a song. Well, there was the Butley Oyster and the Blacksall Ship, I seem to recall.
And we bumped into each other at those two, where we've had the occasional festival since.
We
Or
have
Blacksall.
indeed, yes.
And in Trimley and Felixstowe, I can't remember what it was, the Anchor or something.
Yeah.
Because I was about to start my prison residency. I wasn't waiting to be sentenced. I was right. I'm going to shout that.
Teaching literacy to...
No, well, actually, I was the first storyteller in residence in the British prison, and the son, apart from finding a local councillor who said, "I don't think the people of Norfolk want their money spent on this sort of thing," their headline, because a notorious gangster was in the prison at the time, had the headline, Jack Cray Norrie, and they put me on page 3, which
What were you wearing?
no, yeah, my daughter said that was the nearest I was going to get. And, So, and then of course, we pootled on a few years.
Before you pootle on, when he was at that prison, I was at Hoseley Bay teaching sociology, and I decided, 2-minute story here, that I would talk to them about the con of advertising. And I just talked about how you have to pay more if you get named brands. And one of the young men, because it was a young offenders institution, said, well, in my job, I don't have any choice. I have to wear black pumps and black stay-pressed trousers and a black t-shirt in my job. I said, why? What's your job? He said, I'm a cat burglar.
Excellent. And when I told you I was starting up prison residency, you give me a story. We won't hear it, but it's if you stop Taffy sometimes, she'll tell it.
It was in the supper last night. The pear pip story is the one I gave John.
Which proves that we just, because stories are very old, to keep them alive, we keep telling them over and over and over again over the years. It's a sort of anti-Alzheimer's.
There's no such thing as new material. It's just some people have longer memories than others.
Right. So we'll put it forward. We'll put it forward to the pandemic. Now, you were not. Let me say, no. It was. You weren't good at Zoom mainly because between you and Chrissy, you didn't have a full set of language between you at the time.
I'm with John Cooper Clarke, who on the radio recently said, for me, it was either computer or career. And I chose career. I went, yes.
So, and Chrissy had just fallen off for a wall and one arm.
Yeah.
And so there was no way Zoom was going to work because he relies. He relies, they are a partnership.
We are. No, I admit, I wouldn't be able to do this without Chrissy. Except I am at the moment because she's not appeared.
Anything could happen.
And it will.
Well, she's not here to censor me, so.
And then, but you did make a couple of films.
We did.
And you put it on the World Storytelling Cafe, but then we actually met a year after we were on the second storytelling. Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival, where Taffy Thomas was the guest of honour. Can I have a round of applause? And but the most significant thing that, from my point of view, that happened at that festival with Taffy will tell you about.
Well, it was the fact that John said to me, they will call you the master. Well, I said, I'm not sure I can deal with that because I just consider myself to be just a humble travelling storyteller. But no, the old guys over there, they are the masters. They're just called the master. And most of the masters have died, but a lot of criticism of the BBC. But the North Africa correspondent for the BBC is a wonderful man called Richard Hamilton. And he used his first year as North Africa correspondent in mainly Marrakesh area and a bit beyond in Morocco to photograph and record the stories of the masters. And got a lot of them before they died. And I was happy to hand those stories on. So it meant when John took Chrissy and I over to this festival, I was able to tell some of the stories that had come, obviously after telling some of my own repertoire, the English ones, because there's a very big English presence there, partly because the man on the business community there, and there were 89 storytellers from 19 countries, including all of us here. Every one of us had a free hotel room for the fortnight we're there. The business community just stepped up and did that for us, which was amazing. We were fed and looked after, and but I fed back some of the Moroccan stories that I picked up through Richard Hamilton. And at one of the events, a young boy came up to me and said, "You've just told my grandfather's story. Does that mean I've got to tell it now?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I will." But because I don't walk as well as some of the others, because I'm a stroke survivor, as some folks here will know, they gave us a guide, and our guide could always get us a tuk-tuk. So we were bombing around these narrow cobbled alleyways in Marrakesh in a tuk-tuk, clinging on with people. It was like the Carry On film they haven't yet made, Carry On storytelling. Anyway, so they gave us a guide in the shape of a young man,
Omar.
20 years old, called Omar. And Omar lived with his parents in the Atlas Mountains. And his English was good enough that he could look after us. And every morning he had to walk for an hour and have a 2-hour bus journey from the main road to get to us for 9 o'clock to take Chrissy and I to our gigs. And bless him, he did it. We loved him. So when we heard of the earthquake, which is since then, so I'm looking forward to the earthquake, we wondered whether Omar and his family had survived. So with the miracle of technology, my daughter Rosie contacted Omar, and we were delighted to hear that Omar had not only survived, because he's a Berber and has the local dialect. The Storytellers Cafe, which John may well tell you about in a second, sent food out to the earthquake survivors. And there was film of Omar taking food out. He had the food in one hand, and in the other hand he had a blanket. And on the film there are the ruins of the houses, and these people gathered outside the ruins of their own houses, eating the food he's brought them with a blanket down. And Omar was saying, "Sit down, this is a story from Mr. Taffy, who is the best storyteller in the world."
Oh.
It's not the way I see it, but that's him. So anyway. And then we also heard later that Omar didn't come to any workshops, he just trailed us for that fortnight and learnt by osmosis. We heard that Omar himself is now telling stories.
Yeah.
And they said, John's Moroccan friends said, Taffy left us a new young storyteller for the square. And he's telling in the Berber dialect, and Maria there and John have heard him telling recently. So that's what it's all about, passing on, helping the tradition to live.
Thank you, Taffy. We've only got half hour, so we've had 3/4 of it. So thank you, Taffy.
I won't say anything else.
No, it's all right. It's fine. No, that was magnificent. Round of applause for Taffy Thomas. So, I was over in Marrakesh this year. It's the Islamic City of Culture, and we did the thing about 2 weekends ago. And a big show to about 300 people, and Omar was one of the tellers there. That's his fault. So, but now I'm going to pass on to Zahra, who's tell us a little bit about yourself, Zahra, and then I'll ask the odd question. Nothing too crazy.
Oh, what can I say? Where can I start? So difficult. My name is Zahra. I am Iranian. I was born in Iran. My ancestors, they come from Kashan, an Asian city. And I grew up in Iran up to the age of 15. And then during Iran-Iraq war, I had to leave Iran. That is a story on its own, because I just tell you a little. I remember I was back from school at home like always, and I found my father coming home, and he said to us, pack your suitcases and we are leaving. Soon I knew that something very serious is happening. We had few hours to pack our bags and we left to Turkey. We had to stay there to get our visas to Germany and from Germany to America. I remember that I had to grow up like within 1 or 2 days. I really had to put my childhood behind me and start a new life, learning a new language, new climate, food, everything. So that's how I ended up in the West. And then years after, I studied Eastern art and archaeology in London, SOAS, concentrating on Persian art, and was fascinated by Persian manuscripts which were produced at the courts during 14th century. I realized that the way these manuscripts are studied here in the West, they are really so disconnected from the stories these images are telling, and everything is studied on the surface. A lot was said about the style of the paintings, which school, which painters, but nothing about the stories behind the images. And there and then I made it my intention. I said, this is my mission. I have to bring life to the stories behind these images, because these images are not decorative. They have stories to tell and they are full of meanings. And I think such artworks have been in the hands of art dealers, and for art dealers, a lot is about money. And then in the hands of the scholars who couldn't speak, read and write Persian language fluently. So they were only relying on one sentence to describe, and then a lot was left out. And that's how it all started. And I started telling the stories behind the Persian miniature paintings, works of Shahnameh, Nizami, Rumi, Attar, and all the rest. And they are full of metaphors and many layers of meanings, even for native Persian speakers. Every time I read a line of poetry, it's like I am digging more, and I am hoping with the culture that I carry within me, I am opening a new window for the people outside Iran to see Iran from a different angle, because whenever there is a piece of news about Iran, it's so negative and it's so isolated and it's so far away from the organic, true picture. And perhaps through the stories I'm telling from my Persian poets, ancestors, from my body language, from my voice, from the Persian language, maybe you can see through.
So, how did we meet?
How do we meet? Yes.
We met virtually at first.
Yes.
So, how did you find out about the World Storytelling Cafe? It was during COVID.
It was during COVID, yes, exactly. Yes, it was during COVID, and I went to Iran because I had to take care of my parents, and I still wanted to be connected to all the storytellers in London and also the other parts of the world. And then I discovered, I really don't know, I think I was searching and saw World Storytelling Cafe, and then searched more and more, and then I contacted you. And I have to say, John, you've been amazing, really keeping the doors open. Really, yes. I mean, I have lived in London for many years, and I tried to make contacts with the other storytellers, but nobody has opened the doors towards people outside as openly as you, and so I was able to, make a face.
I've lived off other people's efforts forever. No, and then finally we got a chance to meet. uh, 10-day, no, I went up to Marrakesh to organise the first International Storytelling Festival, and I'm got to say I've never shaken so many hands in my life. And this was the November, and including, well, we wanted to have part of it on the square because we didn't want to sort of just do this sort of cultural colonialism where, boom, yeah, we're bringing storytelling to one of the oldest storytelling cultures in the world. So it had to be a collaboration. So the surviving masters got together, and Zahra I worked with, a young Moroccan guy, and he was translating everything. We said we wanted to do a storytelling circle on the square because there hadn't been storytelling circles on the square for a while. And the masters got to go, and then they said, well, Zahra said to me, the masters have decided we will not have one circle, we will have 5. And so we decided the festival was going ahead. Then they closed the borders. Everyone said, are you going to cancel? And I said, no, the borders are open, it will happen. They opened 8 days before the festival. So it was chaos, but I like chaos. Anyone who was here last night would have realised. And and Marrakesh itself is somewhat chaotic, isn't it?
Just a little.
And so it suited me perfectly. And amongst the people who actually made it was Zahra. So, how did you? What was your? Tell us a little bit about your first experience at first.
I was fascinated. I mean, I come from Iran and I grew up in Iran, so I could see many similarities, but with more color even. And I have to say, the masters, the Moroccan master storytellers, share so much with the Persian master storytellers. The way they behave, the way they carry the stick, the way they tell the stories, especially the male storytellers. So I realize how Sufism have traveled all over the world. And I was fascinated, really fascinated. And I mean, Persian and Arabic language we have a lot in common. And I really tried to listen, and I could grab some words, and it was just wonderful.
And on that first one, we were lucky enough, towards the end of his life, but about 8 years before, I'd met Haj Ahmed Ghazali or something.
Yes.
I think so. And who was the master. And his whole mission was to keep the storytelling going. And he took it to Cafe Clock, another cafe run by an English guy, and all the young storytellers. He attracted young storytellers, which is now the storytelling school. And but he, although the masters, it was there was a while where it was nearly all women, but that was I think that's kind of to do with French colonialism, because it works to everyone's advantage. Colonists had the skill of taking what already exists and making it, exaggerating it if it's their advantage. But 100 years before, half the famous storytellers in Morocco were women. Bless you. That you came through right on cue. And it's
just the stage she's going through.
Absolutely.
And
so
better than that.
And so the Hajj he realised there'd be problems if women started telling on the square, and so he would mentor them and sit then on the square, sit next to them. And no one argued with Hajj. So and now over 50% of the new storytellers in Marrakesh are women. So that was that, and we were lucky enough. He died later that year, and he wasn't able to speak. But years later, when we did the first storytelling festival, Hajj came as our first guest of honour. So we had Hajj as first guest of honour and Taffy as second. So, did you manage to bump into Hajj at all?
Yes, 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 yes.
And then you came to our second festival.
Yes, and then the second festival, yes, which was amazing because we were going to all the different schools, and it was like for me was the climax because I wasn't just interacting with the other storytellers and telling stories in the middle of the square. We were at the heart of the Moroccan society with all the young ones and the teachers, and I was really amazed because I think the Moroccan society is so diverse and they have so much potential because they can speak so many different languages. And I was throwing in Persian words and they grabbed it so quickly. So really, really impressed.
Thank you. And there was we're going to have to get on because I'd like this to be a three, I think.
One thing I didn't know, we were telling stories in the square, you've gathered that. Nobody told me when you're telling a story in the square, if the call to prayer comes and you're in the middle of a story, is it etiquette to reverently stop or carry on? I didn't know what to do, and I was in mid-story at the top of one of the towers, the call to prayer came, and I just carried on. Nobody objected to it, and then going through the rest of the week, some of the Moroccan storytellers, I noticed they didn't stop mid-story either. But I didn't know, I would have happily stopped if I had known that was the thing to do.
Some stopped and some didn't. It was sort of, and I think that's the essence of Marrakesh. Marrakesh is personal choice. You know, we think the West has got we deal with personal choice, but no one deals. Marrakesh is full of personal choice, and so thank you, Zahra. Thank you, Taffy, for that bit. That was fantastic. Now I'm going to click. Can you click this on the spinner? Now we move across. From Iran to via Marrakesh to Greece, and there's. I'd say how the website came about was. This is important because it wasn't me. It was that there was Mike Wood and Lucy Wood, who owned Riyadh in Marrakesh. They wanted to open a storytelling cafe, and would I help? And then they were just about to open it when COVID hit, and they rang me up and said, would I curate the website? So, as we know from yesterday, I'm not technically competent, but there are people spread around the cosmos that usually make it work. And so again, Despina came to us through that website. And how did you tell us a little bit about yourself, Despina.
Okay, I'll keep it short because I think we're a bit over
Oh, we're
time.
well over time, yeah.
Well over time.
But we're allowed to, we're storytellers. It's a festival.
Well, hello, I am Despina and I come from Greece. I live in a little island in the middle of the Aegean Sea called Syros, and I am a teacher of languages there. So I had started doing a little bit of storytelling before COVID times, but it was during the lockdown when we teachers, I don't know if there are any educators here among the audience, we teachers struggled to keep our students engaged with online classes because it was very easy to get distracted, especially if you have teenagers on the other side of the screen. So we had to make do, we had to find ways to keep them interested. And during that time, I met David Heathfield first. He was doing his courses in collaboration with the British Council. I came in contact with David because I saw that he was an educator and a storyteller, and he combined the two. So I attended his courses, and I came in contact with several colleagues from across the globe, and we were all interested in having our classes more engaging for students. So it was just the pieces of the puzzle were coming together.
If I can add to that puzzle.
Yes, please.
I only found David, although he lives down the road from me. Well, the 50 miles down the road in global terms. And I was looking through. You had nothing else to do during the pandemic apart from, you know, I could have written a book, but you know, everyone was writing a book. I came across this thing called the Hands Up Project that was doing work in Gaza and all sorts of places where it was difficult to get English teaching going. And I got in touch with Nick at the Hands Up Project, and he put me in touch with David, who put me in touch with.
You know, this is how things work. This is how stories work. Actually, it's magical. Because stories, they're fine. They're entertaining. They're educational. There's this thing that we all enjoy in them, but also they connect you in a very deep level with like-minded people you never knew before. So that is what we find like true magic in essence in the stories. So through David, I came across my dear friend John Rowe through the World Storytelling Cafe online, and I started being more and more engaged in the storytelling UK style, which I later used in class with my students. It was quite successful. I have sent several of them to tell stories in the Tuesdays for Young International Tellers they do there. If you have any teenage kids that are interested in telling stories.
Yeah, we've got a bit of a break on that at the moment, but we will resurrect it.
It will come back, I'm sure. So it was a very good chance for kids to practice their English and find out they can actually communicate, and this is why they're learning the language. So after that, things just flew, like things often do.
And you've been to Marrakesh a couple of times.
I was really envious when I couldn't make it the first time,
Yeah,
but
no.
yeah, I did make it the second time, and it was a whole
And we
new
still
world.
did a parade the second time, but the first parade was fantastic. Zahra was there, and remember Marrakesh had been closed for 2 years, and 40% of the economy is tourism. So the souk, the traders, they'd had to run back to the desert, but they weren't themselves. And we did a parade through the souk. The British ambassador was there. We had musicians and things, and we went through, and all the traders were out there and bringing smiles on their faces. And one of the traders said to Zahra, it was like bringing lifeblood back to the veins of the souk.
Indeed.
So if we do nothing else, storytellers.
So as Taffy said earlier, Richard Hamilton was there earlier before that, and he had written a highly recommended book called The Last Storytellers, and it's incredible because he did think back at the time that it could be the last storytellers. It seemed like the art was dying, but through these people's work over there, there is a resurrection. So we did see older people being very well respected. When there was a master and the student was going to come on stage and tell, they would first go to their master and kiss their hand and then go and tell the story to the audience. And I witnessed one storyteller, one of the old ones, a very tall, dark, stern-looking guy, give a performative tale, and I could not get a single word from the Arab language he was using, but I could tell when he was transforming into an old guy who had a hard time walking, and I could tell when the king was upset and would order his men to cut somebody's head off. He was so, it was like images came live in your mind just by watching, not even knowing the language. It was incredible. So there were many venues, many different gigs going on at the same time, and usually it was either English or French or Arab. If it was English or French, we would have some interpreters so that the audience, the local audience, would understand what the story was and they would follow. We had a huge tent in Jamal Fna, the large square, and people spent all day there. Some of them slept inside. There was one little lady in a stool outside who was there from the moment the gigs opened until late at night, and she just wanted more and more. It was incredible. And of course, Marrakesh is a whole other world on its own. I mean, the colors and the smells and the people, and their sense of time is totally different to ours. Their sense of driving as well. And then you had the wonderful tea experience now. If there's a Chinese tradition in tea, there is an equal one, only different in the Arab world. It was mint tea always served in those lovely carved jars, the silver ones, and they used these very thin glasses, and it would be poured from up to the bottom, so it would bubble inside us.
Thank you. We're getting the evil eye from the stewards because we should have been out of here for an hour ago. But it's okay. It's always okay. I'm going to do a couple of adverts.